Hey everybody, I'm super excited to introduce my guest today, Nikki Cruz. She's an author, an international TEDx speaker, a coach, and she has a pretty incredible story of resilience to share with us. So hold on to your seats, and without further ado, hi Nikki.
Hi, Carla. Thank you so much for having me here. It's amazing. I always love to connect with other people. So, having connected with you recently was amazing. And to be on this podcast, I'm super honored. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Honored to have you on. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and who you are and what you're going to talk to us about today?
Okay, well, the most important thing to know about me is that I'm known as the joy junkie.
Love it.
Sounds a bit crazy, but why? Because as I'll share with you a little later, I have an incredible story that brought me so much joy. So I love to splash that joy over everybody else. You know, who couldn't use a bit of joy, especially nowadays? But finding where that comes from and what's preventing us from having joy is what's so powerful. I was born in South Africa and grew up there, moved to the States about 30 years ago with my husband, and I'm going to leave a big gap so I can fill you in on my story afterwards. But I now live in Texas with my husband, and I am passionate about women, empowering them, helping them see their self worth, and about impacting the world with what they have.
Who doesn't love to be splashed with joy? So I'm curious, how did you get into this? What created that passion inside you that makes you want to do this, to speak to people, to coach people?
Well, you said to everybody, hold on to your seats. I let go of my seat. I was in a wheelchair for 11 years. And in all that time, I'd had so much faith. I am a Christ centered, faith based now coach and person. And I knew that God was going to heal me as quickly as I got into that wheelchair. He was going to take me out of it. And I had so much belief that that was going to happen. But those 11 years were hard. Not only was I in a wheelchair, but I had 24/7 seizure like spasms and shook horrendously. So I couldn't brush my hair. I couldn't put makeup on. I couldn't dress myself, let alone feed myself. I was totally dependent on other people. And we have a couple of jokes about it because when you're shaking all the time, one of the things you're really good at is scrambled eggs. Somebody just holds the bowl and gives you the fork, and it's like automatic. Or back massages. Just put your hands on my back. You have to find the humor in things. And I'm very fortunate to have a sister who says it always pays to retain your sense of humor. So I found joy in this until the one day that my neurologist turned around after 11 years of having faith and said to me, you will never walk again. And I'm sure we've all had things that people have said to us, you will never, you can't, you won't. And I actually bought into that story. I was so encased in gloom and anger and had this temper tantrum with God. And God just patiently sat there and waited and waited. And fortunately, it only took about 3, 4 weeks. And I was tired of being miserable and angry at my circumstances. I had decided I was going to see myself the way the rest of the world saw me. I accepted the labels of some of the people in the world, not everybody, of being crippled, useless, disabled, and I didn't know how I was going to live with this.
So you were in this state for 11 years and then you felt like you were going to give up?
Yep, yep. At those words, you will never walk again. Just because somebody said it, I suddenly believed it. Up until then, I'd had the hope and I'd been on a lot of medication. I was on medical patches for 9 of those years.
Do you mind if I ask you how you ended up in the wheelchair? Because it sounds like you lived most of your life not in a wheelchair, and then suddenly there you are.
Yeah, absolutely not. And in fact, I'll go back a step further. I was in my youth, very athletic. I was a springboard diver, I was a swimmer. Now, as I got older, I didn't do that much of that, but I was very active. And I had an asthma attack, and they thought I was fine. And then they kept me overnight in hospital. And the next morning, still attached to the heart monitors because my rate was running at in excess of 185 every
And how
time I
old are you at
moved.
this point?
I was mid 40s,
Wow, mid 40s.
early 40s actually, about 43. I never think of the age. But they thought I was fine because I was lying in bed and I got up to use the restroom and my arms just flayed in every direction. I had been shaking severely, my heart rate high, the alarms went off, and there was this incredible fear that overcame me because I suddenly had no control over my body. One of my feet kicked out one way, the other one the other way. And this would have been diagnosed as a functional movement disorder, except that it affected top and bottom, left and right of my body.
Wow. Now
And
that's not your normal. Oh, sorry. Go
a
ahead.
functional movement disorder is usually related to PTSD, which could have happened when I had that severe asthma attack. However, as I say, there is a definitive diagnosis for it. So my symptoms exceeded the diagnosis.
So that's not your usual asthma attack.
I think the asthma attack caused the lack of breathing, the struggle to get me breathing again, to they eventually put me on a BiPAP. I've lived with asthma most of my life, not anymore. Well, a little bit now, but not like that. I was hospitalized over and over again for my asthma, usually in the States every 4 months,
Wow.
usually for over a week at a time. It is my asthma was very uncontrollable, treated with extreme doses of steroids, of prednisone. And that was one of the things they looked at that could have caused this. However, nobody could find out what had happened. And the best example is that it was that trauma that my body gone through and my body said enough. So no direct cause, no anything else. Being tested at UCSF, UCLA, at Berkeley, was treated at in Stanford is where this happened.
Wow. That's right in my backyard.
Yeah, yeah, and nobody could figure it out. And the unfortunate thing is that when people can't give you a medical diagnosis, they tend to say you're making it up, even though
Oh,
you're sitting
yes.
there incapable of doing anything, having physical therapy, having, because very often if somebody can't understand or answer it, they make it psychological. Yes, it may have come from the psychological trauma, but the things that were happening to me were very physical. My body contorted in every angle, you know. I eventually lost all my teeth because I was spasming so badly. I broke a tooth. It ended up being in an infection, and I ended up with a Leyburns angina. I went to the ER because my throat was swollen up like this, and they shifted me off to an emergency treatment center where they were taking MRIs every 4 hours to see that I was still breathing okay because of the swelling in my neck. Anyway, we
My
got over
goodness.
that, and I had another broken tooth from having these spasms, and my doctor said, no way. So my very brave dentist pulled all my teeth out. You've got to understand that to be in that kind of situation, you are spasming all the time. I was shaking and tremoring as though I was having an epileptic seizure, and these poor guys are trying to work on me. So they were very brave.
That is an incredible experience. I'm in the medical field. This is the first time I'm hearing a story like this.
Yeah.
Outside of I think and this is another aspect of the trauma, is when you go into a doctor and you have high blood pressure or diabetes or a sprained ankle, people know exactly what to do. There's a blueprint, there's diagnostic criteria, there's a treatment protocol. But when you have, and there are many of them, when you have one of these more vague or ununderstandable
Yes.
problems, then it becomes something very negative. Either you're faking it, or you're trying to get attention, or you're looking for disability, or, you know, you're
Yeah.
crazy. And
Yep.
people don't want to admit it because they just don't know how. And it's interesting because even if part of it is from like a complex PTSD or a
Yes.
PTSD or something like that, and even if the ultimate treatment is to use your own brain for healing, you can say it's all in the head, but it should be used in a positive context because the brain is
Yes.
powerful and it
Yes.
can heal and it can cause disease and destroy. So let's embrace it.
Absolutely. And I would just like to say and encourage anybody who's in a situation where other people are saying you're faking it or it's all in your head. Yes, stress is in the head. But when your body starts to have physical manifestations from whatever, find a support group, reach out to people. Now, don't start going onto Google and diagnosing yourself with every single thing out there, which is what a lot of people do. But look at your symptoms and look at what could be the causes and connect with people who can support you because you aren't crazy. You're experiencing something. And the fact that you don't have an answer just means you don't know. And sometimes all you need is for somebody to say, I get it. And another illness that is very like that is fibromyalgia.
Oh, yes.
And unfortunately, a lot of people start claiming to have these things so that the people who are seriously and severely suffering with this are ignored.
Yeah, it ends up being a complex problem.
Yeah.
Um, and like you said, definitely find a support group. I do also believe in Googling because I see Google as just a giant library. And when you want to learn something, you go to a library. It's just being open to different types of knowledge and also kind of be smart with it. Like you said, you can go down a rabbit hole with Google, but just use it as a tool, as a
Yes.
one piece of information, and get your information from lots of other places, like a real brick and mortar library, like various health providers, not just your regular doctor, but other
Yeah.
healers who aren't in the traditional Western medical field.
Oh, I so agree.
Do you want to
Yes, it
talk
did.
about your recovery and how that happened?
Absolutely. I mean, I would sit in the physical therapist's office, and if they tried to help me move my hand this way, it would automatically respond. So I had no motor function skills. It would respond in the opposite way. And I literally couldn't stand my limbs. I had very bad dystonia as well, distorted, contorted. So people weren't around me because it was very difficult to be around me. That was part of the anger, it was part of the hurt. And yet I loved people so much. I was still being encouraging and supporting to the odd person on the phone who I was still in touch with. And when this was said to me, you will never walk again, as I say, I went through this period of anger. And I said to God, how do you expect me to do anything from this wheelchair? I knew I had a dream. I knew I had a purpose. And I lost all of that in that moment of lack of self belief until I got fed up of being miserable. You know, you can only be really angry for so long. And I'm fortunate to have a faith based foundation that allowed me to turn around and say, okay, God, I am going to be the best version of myself, whether I'm in a wheelchair or walking. And for the next 3 months, I began to find joy in my circumstances. It was like a light suddenly went on. I had gratitude for what I did have, I had gratitude for what I could do. And I don't know how many people out there know that gratitude invites abundance. It shifts your mindset so powerfully. And you said something earlier, Carla, which I discovered later, and that is that your mind can heal. I was watching a church service online after these 3 months. So it was my 11 years, my 3 or 4 weeks of being totally angry, and then 3 months of really believing I did have something to offer. And just the pleasures I found in small things became contagious to other people. And I realized we aren't defined by our circumstances, but I had chosen to buy into that story. The words that were spoken over me and how I believed the world saw me, the labels of the world didn't measure up. And I sat down in front of my computer on 28th of March, and it was Palm Sunday. And I just said, God, I'm coming to you expectantly. And I thought, okay, he's going to heal my heart. Some of the self condemnation I now had at being mad with God, at having given up on myself. So often, even when we move forward, we hold on to that self condemnation. And I watched the service and I could feel the Holy Spirit moving. And afterwards, I went to the bathroom, ran a bath. I could only bath in about this much water because if I spasmed backwards, I would drown. My head went underwater. And I was lunged over the bath. And I was about to go and call my husband. And I reached back for my wheelchair and it wasn't there. And I began to look over my shoulder and I stood up and my wheelchair wasn't there. I had walked to the bathroom without even realizing it. And then out of
Wow.
habit, lunged over the bath to run the bath. So I went out looking for my wheelchair, and there it was, sitting in front of the computer where I had left it. And that was like my bedroom, it was the living room, and that's where my hospital bed was. And it was like, okay, what's going on? Is this? So I went running down the corridor to where my husband was working, and my wheelchair didn't fit down that corridor. So I was yelling, Christopher, Christopher. And he came out and said, what's all this commotion? I said, look, I can walk. And he looked and I turned around and I picked up my cat. I swooped up my cat. And those cats were terrified of me because if I tried to hold them, they would end up getting shaken. Or if I tried to pet them, I would usually end up beating them. And I swooped my cat up. I walked outside, down our little stairs into the garden with my husband running after me, going, be careful, be careful. And I went back inside, and I think I moved around everywhere because I could. For the first time, I could choose where to sit. Have you ever thought about that? Somebody who's got a cane or a walker or in a wheelchair, they don't get to choose where to sit. Just a little thing like that, you know, little things like not knowing, not being able to go to the fridge even in a wheelchair and reach what's on the top shelf. Now, if you live with somebody, you make accommodations for those things. But what about when somebody visits or you visit somebody and you bring them a gift and you put it on the counter just out of their reach? It's those little things that had been so
That
frustrating.
is
And I could do
amazing.
everything. So I did everything in one day. And my husband sat down and looked at me and I said, well, and he said, I have to go and fix the air conditioner. He was in so much shock. He went away. So
Yeah, I can
that is
only
that
imagine.
story. Yeah.
Are you familiar with Joe Dispenza?
I know the name.
When I heard your story, I thought of him. He had a kind of a similar thing where he had an accident and he was paralyzed and he used the power of the mind to heal himself. In your case, it was unwavering belief in your faith. He had, whether you call it God or spirit or life or whatever the term is for you, he tapped into that meditation, deliberate healing, and made a very remarkable comeback, just like you. But so many people overcome so many things,
Yes.
and it's just time and never giving up. And I think, like you said, one of the things was just having this gratitude, having this joy,
Yes.
finding gratitude and joy in everything. Because when you're angry, everything is tensed. And so it's
Yes.
almost like a block, an obstacle. And when you can just kind of let that go, like I don't know about you and your coaching practice, but that's a big one for me. Just, kind of let it go. It's just
Yep.
amazing the things that can happen, the obstacles that fall away.
And you know, the mind is so super powerful. And what I know now, after having studies and leaning into neuroplasticity, which is where, as you put thoughts in your mind, it actually changes the DNA. And every thought you put in your mind affects every single cell in your body. You know how people say junk in, junk out? If you eat a whole lot of rubbish, which yes, I'm guilty of, you're going to put on weight. I love me some chocolate cake. You're going to put on weight. Same thing with the mind. If you feed your mind with negativity and negative thoughts, it actually changes your mind. Be so aware of what you're putting in. And what I've learned now as a result of studying and sitting in, I look at it and I go, you know what? I'm living proof that what you put into your brain changes your body and can heal you. I'm
And
living
it
proof of it.
and it's such a huge gift to have, especially in our society where everything is so negative and it's just hard to find. That's one of the reasons why I love to do these podcasts is I can find other people who have gone beyond that.
Yeah.
And sometimes it takes a huge life altering experience like what you have. I've had a few before you can tap into that
Yes.
piece of your mind where you don't listen to the BS that's going on
Yeah.
outside in the environment, and you can step away from it so that when you're in an environment where there are other people who are still in that negative mindset, um, you can
And
thrive.
it's actually so incredibly powerful. Now, as I said, I'd been on pain medications for 9 years continuously on pain medication that is banned in so many other countries. My mind was mush. After 11 years in a wheelchair, you shouldn't physically be able to walk anyway. Now, because I spasmed, my muscles were incredibly strong. But I was standing there, I was walking around. My mind was clear. I just had to catch up on 11 years of not knowing what had happened with tech, which was amusing. But
Now,
it's not, I just want to address what you said about mindset because that is so true. We can withdraw, but you know what? There is so much in our minds we aren't even aware is forming a foundation for what we believe. Steve Eckhart of Secrets of a Millionaire Mind says, don't trust what I say to you. Don't even trust what you say. Go and examine why you believe what you believe. If you don't like cats, ask yourself why. If you believe you're sick, ask yourself why. If you believe you're sickly, is it because everybody said that to you? Who are you really? Because when you believe the wrong things about yourself, your self worth goes out the window. And if you want to impact the world, which I believe every person does, whether it's one person they want to impact or millions of people, go back and look at your self worth. Change your mindset by speaking positively over yourself. I believe that was a big part of my healing. And I was actually reading a book called Redeeming Your Timeline. And it basically talks about letting go of your past hurts. You can't change what's happened to you in the past, but you can change the garbage that entered your personality and your mind as a result. Is it easy? Not always. Is it worth it? Absolutely. Sorry, I get so passionate about this. You might have noticed.
we all
And
love passion. We
not everybody's in a wheelchair. What is your mind strapped to? And you will hear me say that over and over again. You might think, I need healing. I need to get out of this depression. This formula applies to you. Go and look at what you're thinking, what you're focusing on.
Now, can you tell us briefly what was your life like before all of this happened, and what is your life like now?
Before all of this happened, I was somebody who had come to America, did not yet have a green card because my husband was here. We were waiting for green cards. 9/11 happened and it slowed the process down. So for 10 years, I couldn't work. So I spent my time connecting with other people because without a green card, you're not legally allowed to work. And I respected that about the country I was being hosted by. So I used to babysit everybody else's kids. Because of my severe health challenges, I didn't have kids. I used to look after my friends' kids. I stayed at a friend's house who had 6 kids. The youngest one is special needs child. And for the first time, they could go away. And then I got my green card. And I did what I'd always wanted to do. I opened a fair trade store. And fair trade helps people in disadvantaged communities throughout the world to live above the poverty line by being paid fair value for their goods. Coming from South Africa, I knew a number of people who were struggling to get by, who've made the most beautiful craft. So I started this store called Fair Trade Gifts, and it was a physical store in a beautiful historical village. And then I couldn't do it. And I kept saying, I'm going to get healed tomorrow. I'll go back. And after 3 months of friends and family, and it's only my husband and I here, so mainly friends helping us keep the store open, we realized this just wasn't an option.
Now, what
Couldn't.
does your life look like now? You've been up and walking since March 28th of what year?
3 years ago.
Wow.
3 years ago. So it's just, I had my 3 year anniversary in March, on the 28th of March. And in fact, that's a perfect intro to what my life looks like now. 6 days later, after that anniversary, I was standing on a TEDx stage in Zimbabwe, delivering my talk on how people get to live beyond their circumstances and how people get to see themselves not by the labels of the world, because we get to own our value and shine and find joy in that. I am now a speaker. I'm a coach. I love empowering people. I'm passionate. I physically drive. It took me a while to start driving again. We moved from California to Texas to attend the church that I was watching when I was healed. And we have relationships with that church. We have built a vocational center in Uganda. We run a food bank in Uganda because I get to give back. And just as inspired as I've become, I get to inspire others. And our ministry to Uganda came out of a relationship I built with somebody when I was in my wheelchair. So I'm very active. I'm very involved. People say, slow down. I say, why? And every now and then I wake up in the morning and I put my feet on the floor and I realize what a blessing it is to be able to do that.
That gives
And
me
I
chills.
just live in gratitude. Sitting down next to a swimming pool, dangling my feet in the swimming pool. I couldn't do that before. And it's, we went to England and I crossed the road to take a picture of the castle. And I turned around and I said to my husband, I could move and get the angle I wanted on the picture. Silly little things like that.
I am so
So
inspired by you.
thank you.
At the end of each episode, I love to have a call to action for people. So, can you give a call to action for anybody, regardless of their faith, regardless of their circumstances, whether they have money to invest or not? Say someone is out there and they are struggling with a medical problem, particularly one that's not supported by the medical community. What can they do today to get to a better place.
I would like to encourage you to pick up a pen and paper and write down 3 things that you think are precious about yourself. I want you to share that with somebody else, and I want you to ask them what they find special about themselves. And then I want you to look at how you can actually act either on or in one of those 3 things to positively and joyfully impact somebody else's life. Can you imagine if all of us did that? The ripple effects it would create through the world. Not only are we recognizing our own gifts, but others as well. So those 3 things, write 3 things down that you find valuable about yourself. It might be the color of your eyes. It might be your hair. And if you can't find one, think harder or ask somebody. We all have them. We're all valuable and precious. So write down those 3 things, share it with somebody and ask them their 3 things, and then go and act on that.
That is wonderful advice. Thank you so much for being on the show today.